All right, so just to continue, so the thing that happened was, yeah, so as I said, the shoot away machine messed up my shot. It caused problems because my dad helped me my whole life. He shot me every single day. If there was ever any problems, he would fix it, but he didn't realize the shoot away messed up my shot. And as I said, I never told people before, and I'm not going to go into more details because I don't want to make people think. And I could go into way more details about how the shoot away messed up my shot and how good shooters shoot and how the shoot away machine doesn't allow it. But I shoot the ball into the net. It goes through the big net. It rolls down the rack, and I pick it off the rack. And when I was picking it off the rack, I would pick it off the rack and I would step like this, and then that's what happened is my left foot would go in front of my right and I'd shoot it because I'm picking the ball off the rack, or I have to step straight forward and do this. Now, before I had the shooting machine, I'm not gonna go into details. It's all about how you move into it. But long story short, I would shoot with my left leg pointed out and like this, and my right foot pointed forward toward the rim. That's how good shooters shoot. But picking off the shoot away machine, I started shooting like this, left foot in front of my right. Then my dad's like, "Well, Ryan, you're shooting square. You're shooting with your left foot in front of your right, and you're shooting square. Shoot sideways." But then my dad told me, keep your left foot forward and put your right foot like this. The exact opposite of how a good shooter shoots. And I can go into details about how really it's based off how it's picking the ball off the rack and moving into shots, and why good shooters. I can go into details, but I want to make good shooters think. On just surface level, I'm picking the ball off the rack, and I'm doing this. So then my dad's like, "Okay, do this." But that's the exact opposite of how good shooters shoot. Good shooters shoot not with this foot forward and this foot like this, but with this foot to the side, shooting to the side, and this foot forward like this. But my dad was like, "Okay, so just pick up the ball off the rack, and since you're shooting with your left foot in front of your right, go like this." So I'm do form shots. So I'd be standing like this with my left foot forward like this and doing this. Messed up my shot. Messed up my whole game. So then I'm in the games, and I'm shooting like I'm practicing picking the ball off the rack. I'd be in the backyard and going like this, and then going straight forward and doing this. So I'm in the game, and I catch the ball and I go like this. Good shooters do not do that. Good shooters, I'm not going to go into details, but they do not do that. They shoot, left foot pointed out, right foot pointing forward like this. Okay? But anyway, so it messed up my shot. But then, so I felt like I needed my dad, and I'm telling my dad, "Dad, can you please help me shoot more?" And he would be helping me. But then you get frustrated. "Oh, you suck. It's no use. Whenever I fix your shot, it goes back to being bad." It's because when he would fix my shot, he'd be passing to me. And then my shot would get a little bit better because I'd be doing it automatically, right? But then I go back to picking the ball off the rack. So he's like, "It's no use. You suck now." So, but in my mind, I don't know what's wrong with my shot. I don't know if there is anything wrong. He's the one who's telling me there's something wrong with my shot. I didn't even know that I was shooting my left foot in front of my right. He's the one who told me that. So I don't know what to do. So I'm like, "Dad, please help me more." And then that's when the fights are happening. "Oh, no." And then my grandpa comes in. My grandpa's like, "Well, Ryan, when your dad says he doesn't want to shoot with you," my dad would be like, "I don't want to shoot with you. Fuck it. It's no use. You suck now." But I needed help. My shot was messed up, and I didn't know how to fix it. My dad helped me my whole life, and I didn't know it was a shoot away machine. So then my dad, so my grandpa comes in. "Well, Ryan, you just have to understand that everything's just fine. You can't make things happen. You have to be in the flow. And, when you're in the flow, you don't make things happen. You can't force things. You got to be in the flow. Everything is just fine. The universe is one energy event. Everything is just fine. Trust the universe. God is energy. Everything is just," and it's like, no, dude, not everything was just fine. It was a terrible, tragic situation, but my grandpa didn't know that. So later my grandpa would say, I'm going to get to that. But later when I would finally figure out that it was a shoot away machine, and I tried to tell my grandpa's like, "Ah, ha, ha, ha. It wasn't the shoot away machine. You were just upset because you were playing against bigger, better players, and you took your frustration on your dad, and that's why your dad beat you up." That's not what happened. But my grandpa came from Kauai, and then he came in and he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know about the shoot. He didn't know how good of a shooter I was. He didn't know it was a shoot away machine, and he didn't believe me. So, but that's later. So, but anyways, so that all that happened. So then my mom's like, "Yeah, Ryan," when I'd be like, "Dad, I need help," my dad's like, "Ryan, everything is just fine. You can't force things. My grandpa would say, "Ryan, you got to learn to accept bad calls. Your dad's making a bad call. He doesn't want to shoot with you. He doesn't want to help you." Because I tried to see a psychologist. My mom made me see a psychologist, and I was telling the psychologist, "Well, can we make it so my dad could shoot with me like once a week for 15 minutes. That would, because it was capricious. My dad would only shoot at me if he found out that I had a really good game that day. My grandpa would be like, my grandpa tried to blame me later, and he'd be like, oh, it wasn't because you were playing good that your dad shot with you. It was because you were treating him good because you were playing good. No, it was more complicated than that, but he wants to blame me, make me the victim. And like I said, my grandpa did more than anybody to make me crazy. There's nothing you could think about somebody making somebody more crazy than what my grandpa did to me. It made me crazy. So, because it's all victim blaming. It was, in this case, I was a victim, dude. It really was. And I understand that whole like, oh yeah, I understand the niche idea, like, oh, people like being victims because it gives them power. But in my case, I really was a victim in this situation. You know, but I came up on top. I discovered theory of everything. I'm doing good. But it was a tragic situation. And I'm not mad at them. I'm like, it's a tragic situation. It was a shoot away. Dad didn't know. I didn't know it was a sad. So let's move on. But they won't. But this is my point. So I'm trying to explain it, you know. Anyway, so my shot got messed up and I need my great dad's help. My grandpa's like, well, Ryan, you got to accept bad calls, you know. Everything is just fine. And so then my dad's beating me up. I need his help. My dad's beating me up. My mom's like, you know, my dad's like, everything's just fine, Ryan. My mom's like, Ryan, everything is just fine. You need to accept our calls. You know, we need to accept our calls. You can't force things. You can't make things happen. You know, as I'm being beat up because I needed help. So it's a tragic situation. I needed help. I was the best shooter in the country. I was considered one of the best players in the country, and my game got destroyed. And it was because of the shoot away machine. But as I would say later, my mom and dad wouldn't believe that. But my grandpa, after all this, he said, you know, well, Ryan, you know, one thing is, never talk about the past, because you didn't want me to talk about my dad beating me up and all that stuff. So he's like, you know, Jesus, when he said, put your plow down and never look back. And that's, you know, don't look back in the past. If you're in the flow, you're in the eternal moment. So I was cool with that. I was like, okay, I will never talk about the past. I'll never talk about me being beat up. I'll never talk about all that stuff. Because at that time, I didn't know it was a shoot away machine. I didn't even know what was going on. And, you know, I graduated from high school and I was moving on. I was playing basketball at UC San Diego. I was on a team there. Things, you know, I was moving on, and I wouldn't talk about the past. I never brought up the past. And one time I visited my dad, one time in college, my mom and dad, and my dad told me, Ryan, if you bring up the past, you bring up all that shit, you know, you bring up he said, I'm gonna have my Rottweiler rip you apart. I'm gonna have my Rottweiler, I'll kill you. He said, don't start anything, don't bring up the past. And I never did bring up the past. I was like, cool. But I was upset, but I was like, okay, cool. I never brought up the past. Now, I started watching videos when I was in college, and I saw what happened with the shoot-away machine. I saw the videos of me picking the ball off the rack, and I saw how I would move into it like this, left foot, right foot, and that's what made my left foot go in front of my right foot, and how it made my left foot go point forward, whereas before it would point to the side. And I started seeing how I moved into shots before the shoot-away, and I was like, oh, it was the shoot-away machine that messed up my shot. But I still didn't bring up the past, because I was like, okay, well, my mom and dad and grandpa say I'm never allowed to bring up the past. So I was like, okay, well, I'll still not bring up the past. Okay, so I'm cool with that. I'm like, okay, I just won't bring up the past. I'm moving on. Okay, then I had a miraculous discovery. Well, I was playing basketball at UCSD and then I quit. And then and then like a month after I quit, you know, my sophomore year, I had a miraculous discovery of the quadrant model. It was a theory of everything. It was an incredible theory. And then my mom and dad ended up coming to visit me to help me pack up my stuff. Like I said, they only saw me a few times in college. And when they helped me pick up my stuff, I showed my dad. And I was like, Dad, you know, I discovered theory of everything. And I tried to show him. And my dad was like, oh, it was like, you have schizophrenia. Because I told him before I even showed him, I said, hey, Dad, I know that, you know, some people think that they discovered theory of everything. They have delusions of grandeur. I was the one who said it first. I was like, they have delusions of grandeur. They have schizophrenia. I'm like, this is not schizophrenia. I actually discovered theory of everything. Check this out. And I started showing him the quadrant model. And my dad was like, as I'm showing him, like right in the middle, right in the beginning of showing him, I'm like, and look, you know, there's 4 domains of life, and the 4th one is different. And, you know, there's questionable 5th. There's always a questionable. So I'm explaining him all this shit. And then my dad was like, Ryan, you have schizophrenia. This is a delusion of grandeur. And I was like, what are you talking about, Dad? I was like, I told you before I even showed you that I know I don't have a delusion of grandeur. You know? He's like, no, you have schizophrenia. And I was like, what are you talking? So then I went back to my place, went back to my apartment, and then my dad told my mom, Marla, Ryan has schizophrenia. You know, and my mom was like, oh my God, I knew it. Oh, I knew it. Ryan, you're going to have to take medicine for the rest of your life. I can't believe my son has schizophrenia. Oh my God. and she's doing all that shit. And I was like, guys, I don't have schizophrenia. I really did discover the theory of everything. And my mom was like, oh my God, no, she has schizophrenia, really? Ryan, you have to see a doctor immediately, blah. So I started yelling at them, and I'm like, get out of my apartment if you're gonna do this. Now, this was tragic because they left, and then, like I said, I had some basketball videos, and this was before I lost the swag flow. I had basketball videos there, a whole box. I left because I had to pack on my own, and I left like a ton of basketball videos. But at the time, remember, my grandpa's whole thing was like, yeah, just let go of the past. And I was cool with that at the time. I never brought up the shoot-away machine at that time. This was my sophomore year of college. Even though at that time I had noticed, I had watched the videos and I saw that the shoot-away machine messed up my shot, I still hadn't told my mom and dad because I knew I wasn't allowed to talk about the past. So I was just like, but I left a bunch of stuff at the apartment, including a whole box of basketball videos, of DVDs. If people would have seen those videos, they would see how good of a shooter I was. And I would like to see them now so I could first off study the swag flow and also study how I shot. Now, it was later that I lost the swag flow. So then my mom and dad left, and they think I'm have schizophrenia, and that's terrible. It's tragic. And this is what my mom said. She said, Ryan, this is what happened. This is why your shot got messed up. And this is why you fell apart in high school, because you started to become schizophrenic, and now you have full-blown schizophrenia, and this is why you need to see a doctor. So right then I knew that she was victim blaming me. She was like, this is why you were beat up. And in my mind, I was like, no, it was a shoot-away machine, but I knew I wasn't allowed to talk about the past. So I didn't even bring it up. But I was like, that's when I yelled at her. I was like, get out of here. What the fuck are you guys talking about? I don't have schizophrenia, because I didn't have schizophrenia. But I knew in my mind, I was like, this is a defense mechanism by my parents. They really did believe I had schizophrenia, but I knew that they had if all the trauma wouldn't have happened, they wouldn't have been so quick to jump on the notion that I had schizophrenia. But because they wanted to have some sort of excuse for the abuse that they did to me, so this was perfect for them. They could say, oh, this is why we beat him up. And this is what my mom would later tell me. She would say, oh, she said, because later I would try to explain to her about the shoot-away machine. And my mom said, oh my God, you don't take responsibility for anything. Oh, because she's trying to mimic my grandpa's teachings. But my grandpa said she's stubborn and she's immature, and she expresses dualistic software. She doesn't understand. But so she does it in a way that's not. He says he casts pearls of swine, and she doesn't have the higher consciousness, but she memorizes what he teaches, and she does it in a stupid way. But she's like, oh my God, you don't take responsibility for anything. It wasn't a shoot away. You just fell apart because you couldn't handle the pressure, and you started to become mentally ill. That's what happened to your shot. That's what happened to your basketball. It wasn't because of the shoot away machine. If anything, the shoot away machine would have helped you. Again, but I'll get to that later. But again, with what my grandpa did, I'm going to get to this. My grandpa set up the conditions to make me fucking go crazy. I can't think of a way to make someone go more crazy than what they did to me. Now, again, people are going to be, oh, you're a victim. You're victim mentality. What the fuck they did to me was horrifying, dude. And it's still going on. And it's like, I can't think of a way to make someone more crazy than what they have done. But I want to move on, and I want them to stop doing it. That's the thing. I'm not mad at them. I'm like, okay, I understand. I feel bad for them. My mom and dad want to believe that I had schizophrenia or that I'm crazy because they want to tell themselves, we beat him up in high school. It wasn't our fault. It's because he's an effective human being. But I'm trying to say, no, that's not what happened. It was a shoot-away machine, and I'm not mad at you guys. It was a tragic thing. It was terrible, and it was horrible. I needed help to fix my shot. Dad desperately wanted it. I desperately wanted it. He tried. He couldn't. He didn't know it was a shoot-away. I didn't know it was a shoot-away machine. I didn't know that picking the ball off the rack messed up my shot. I didn't know that my dad thought that putting my right foot like this and putting my left foot forward was good because Nick Turley shot like that. But that's not how I shot. I studied videos later, and I saw how my left foot was this way and my right foot was this way, the exact opposite of what my dad had me do. And it's just like, if it wasn't for the shoot away, none of it would have happened. But my point is, so, I showed my mom and dad the quadrant model my sophomore year, and then they say, oh my God, you have schizophrenia. Then they left. That's the last time I ever really saw them. So people would be like, well, if I tell people, oh, my mom and dad think I have schizophrenia, they'd be like, they probably will think, well, they probably have reasons. They've probably interacted with you many times, and they clearly think you have schizophrenia. They must be, they must know what they're talking about. Your dad's a doctor. Your dad's an orthopedic surgeon, even though he had C's in college, and he's only an orthopedic surgeon because my grandpa got him in because my grandpa was a doctor. But, my mom's dad, but, he must know what he's talking about. He doesn't. He hasn't seen me since that time. My dad has not interacted with me since that one time he died. He said I had schizophrenia one time after seeing me, and he didn't interact with me at all. He just made an assumption. He doesn't have credentials to say that. So that's my point. So then that happened, and then I go visit my grandpa, and my grandpa was like, well, this is my grandpa was worried that I had schizophrenia, but he ended up saying I didn't because he said I didn't have any symptoms. But he was surprised because he was like, it seems like you have schizophrenia, but he didn't understand the quadrant model, and he didn't believe it. My grandpa is not in line with the truth of reality, which is a quadrant model. My grandpa's like, everything is energy, and no, it can't be the quadrant model. Reality is way more complex than that. What about all the 3s and the 5s and the 6s? And so my grandpa was like, at first he was worried. So my grandpa, he was like, well, he would later say, oh, well, what's going on is Ryan has a fragile ego. So what he's doing is he has invented the quadrant model because he doesn't want to be independent and he wants to stay dependent on his mom and dad. So this is an ego strategy and a manipulation tactic that he invented the quadrant model in order to stay dependent on his mom and dad. And what Ryan really wants is independence. And that's what my grandpa was teaching in high school. He was like, Ryan, what you really want is independence. That's why you're fighting with your dad. And that's not what I wanted. I was fighting with my dad because my shot was messed up. I needed to fix my shot. That was it. We don't need to come up with all these fucking weird conclusions. It was so simple what happened. But my grandpa's like, no, it's because you know, this is very common. You know, I'm a psychologist, and because he was a family therapist. He's like, this is very common. A lot of kids, they start to rebel against their dads and moms because they want independence, and that's what's going on with you. So what we need to do is make you independent. But I was like, no, I don't want independence. I want help. My shot's messed up, and I didn't know it was a shoot away machine, and I need my dad's help. My dad helped me my whole life. But my grandpa's like, no, you want independence. So my grandpa continues with this. He's like, yeah, Ryan, he invented this quadrant model in order to, it's an ego strategy to stay independent. So what we need to do is we need to make Ryan work. So he put me in his backyard when I visited him one time in Kauai, because again, I was staying at UC San Diego and he was living in Kauai. So I flew to Kauai for vacation, and he had me in the backyard digging holes, and I didn't know why I was digging holes. Now this is the thing, like I said, I was always anti-white, and I was always a kind of a communist, because I saw myself as Jewish, and I saw white supremacy as bad and Nazis as bad and everything. So later what I would think about this, I would think about like Laban. Laban means white, and he made Jacob work, and he mistreated Jacob, but then Jacob ended up being being a huge prophet, right? But I was later I would think of myself as Jacob, and I'm like, yeah, and Laban means white, and I'm like, yeah, my grandpa's an evil white man who's and white people are all into working hard and stuff, and trying to make people work hard and stuff. And my grandpa's always been like, yeah, just work, so long as you work hard, and life is an anti-entropic rewarding function, and you just have to work hard and be a part of the synergy of the universe, and so that because we're moving toward the next stage of evolution. And I always thought that as white supremacy, like work hard and all that bullshit. So I was just like, dude, but in my grandpa's mind, he's like, if we get Ryan to work, this will get him to strengthen his ego and develop skills and competencies, strengthen his ego. And then he will let go of the quadrant model, because Ryan really wants he really wants independence, but because he has a fragile ego, he wants to stay dependent on his mom and dad. And the quadrant model is a strategy to do that. No, the quadrant model wasn't a strategy to stay dependent on my mom and dad. The quadrant model, the only reason why I discovered it was because I fucking discovered it, because I discovered a theory of everything. It's like I didn't have some sort of a weird agenda to try to stay dependent on my mom and dad, like my grandpa's coming up with all this weird shit. It's not that complicated. I discovered the theory of everything. I just happened to do it. And then I didn't have any weird, I just invented this to stay dependent on my mom and dad because I have a fragile ego. No, that's not what happened. But that's what my grandpa's thinking going on, because my grandpa didn't believe the quadrant model. So that's what my grandpa's like, yeah, that's what's going on. So then my mom and dad are like, okay, well, we need to make Ryan independent. They haven't seen me. They haven't seen me throughout all college. They since that one time they saw me in college when I showed them the quadrant model, they've only saw me a couple times in college. They really haven't had any interaction with me since high school. But they're making all these assumptions. Oh, Ryan's schizophrenic and he needs to be independent. And no, I needed support. That's why I told them the quadrant model to begin with, because I was like, I discovered a theory of everything. Can you guys give me some support? Can you guys help me out? Can you guys give me I was hoping that they'd be happy about it. In my fucking naivety, I thought my dad would be like, wow, this is incredible. I didn't know my dad wasn't that smart. not to be mean, but I thought my dad would be like, wow, this is really great, Ryan. Instead, like I said, he said, this is schizophrenia. And my mom was like, oh my God, you have schizophrenia. Dude, I discovered a big theory, you know? And this is like, it's tragic. Everything that's gone on is tragic. So, but then so again, it's all stemming back from the shoot away machine. So at that time, my grandpa's like, oh, well, Ryan really wants his independence. No, I needed help with my shot. But then now my grandpa's still maintaining that. Well, Ryan really wants his independence. So let's, make him work and throw him to the side. And you guys, so my mom and dad, my grandpa didn't mean this, but my grandpa says, he cast pearls of swine. So my mom and dad misinterpreted that as, okay, so let's not talk to him. Let's throw him to the side and let's be emotionally distant and evil to him and mean to him. That's not what my grandpa meant by independent. He wanted me to just work and so I can gain competence and stuff, but he didn't want me to be ostracized and outcasted. But that's what my parents interpreted it as. But at the same time, I do think my grandpa did kind of want that, because my grandpa he thought I was crazy. Now he says, I didn't think you were crazy. Yes, he did fucking think I was crazy. He didn't believe the quadrant model. He was looking down on me. And I do think that he wanted me away from my dad because he liked my dad and he thought I was crazy. He didn't believe the quadrant model. And again, he didn't know about the shoot away machine. And I only talked to him about that later. So at this time, he didn't know. So in his mind, I'm just probably some lunatic and he wants me. So he's like, yeah, just get him out of the family and just make him work. And, so I'm basically outcasted, ostracized, marginalized. I discovered theory of everything. I want some help. But my girl's like, oh, he needs independence. And this is an ego strategy to stay dependent. And then, so I'll continue with this in the next lecture.